Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. You don't forget the sound of human teeth snapping an inch from your ear, especially not when they're attached to a man still wearing a Department of Corrections uniform. They put 6 of us on that transport bus just after dawn. I remember the clank of steel cuffs and the hush of early morning fog curling over Route 42. The bus was an old International 3800, painted dull white with fading blue stripes, modified for inmate transfers between upstate correctional and a federal detainment site near Bedford. We didn't ask questions. You never do on those rides. You get on. You stare out the window, and you don't talk unless someone makes you. I was shackled at the ankles and wrists, chain fed through a bolt in the floor. To my left was Rojo Santiago, petty thief turned gang enforcer from Spanish Harlem. He was humming under his breath, something like a lullaby in Spanish. Across the aisle sat Carl Missouri Benton, a quiet mountain of a man with facial tattoos that curled like ivy across his scalp. Rumor was he beat a man with a fire extinguisher during a liquor store robbery gone sideways. The others were new transfers, names I didn't recognize, but I wouldn't forget their faces after what happened. The 2 officers up front were relaxed. One drove, the other sat in the jump seat with a sidearm visible on his hip and a Remington 870 shotgun in the overhead rack. Their names were Morrison and Hale. Morrison looked fresh from basic, 22, baby-faced, probably still called his mother every Sunday. Hale had a Marine Corps tattoo and a limp that suggested he'd been through real trouble long before we entered his life. We were somewhere near Dutchess County, cutting through a patch of forest on a road that hadn't seen a major repair in a decade, when the radio crackled. Not music, not dispatch, just static, then a distorted voice. All units, containment failed, avoid proximity to infected personnel. Repeat, do not engage. Hale twisted the volume up and leaned in. Evacuation orders now in effect. New Paltz overrun. Mass casualty event at... Then silence. No one on the bus spoke, not even Rojo. Morrison slowed the vehicle. Hale stood up, unholstered his sidearm, and radioed back. Dispatch, confirm last transmission. Is this a drill? Repeat, is this a... A scream ripped through the speakers. Something about that sound bypassed every rational part of my brain. It wasn't pain, it was madness, wet, primal, like a man being eaten alive and realizing too late that he deserved it. Morrison slammed the brakes. The chains pulled taut across our waists as the bus swerved. The tires screeched and we veered sideways into a ditch. Hale fell forward into the windshield, then spun around, weapon raised. That's when Morrison started convulsing in the driver's seat. I thought it was a seizure. His neck twisted at an impossible angle, and a gurgling growl pushed out of his throat. Then he lunged. I watched Hale shoot him point blank in the chest, 2 rounds. Morrison didn't stop. He bit down hard on Hale's face, right between the cheek and jaw, and didn't let go. What happened next was chaos. Blood sprayed the windshield. The shotgun came loose from the overhead rack and clattered down. Rojo screamed and tried to pull away from the bolted floor. I yanked against the chains until my wrists tore raw. Missouri Benton didn't yell. He just stared, eyes calculating, like he was memorizing every inch of the scene. Hale was already gone. Morrison, or whatever he'd become, ripped through him and turned toward us, smearing blood down the aisle. And then fate intervened. The bus rolled. I don't know if it was the ditch or Morrison's flailing body, but we tipped over hard, glass exploding and metal crumpling. The impact jarred my bones like lightning. I blacked out. When I came to, we were on our side. The emergency hatch cracked open. The chain that held our cuffs to the floor had snapped in the crash. I felt wetness on my face. Blood, maybe mine. Rojo was groaning, pinned under a bench. Missouri was already moving, dragging himself towards the hatch. "Morrison?" I whispered. He was beneath the wreckage, skull cracked open but still twitching. One milky eye met mine, and I knew he'd try to kill us if he could move. I don't know what came over me. I grabbed the shotgun, still loaded, and pumped a shell into the chamber. One blast. The noise was deafening inside the wreck, but it stopped Morrison from twitching. We climbed out through the roof hatch, now sideways against the embankment. It was mid-morning. Mist still clung to the trees, but the air was strangely still. No sirens, no birdsong, just silence. 6 had gone into the bus. 4 of us made it out. Rojo, Missouri, a younger guy who said his name was Jaden Ng, Brooklyn kid, in on a non-violent cybercrime charge, and me. My name's Devin Brooks. I was locked up for aggravated assault, a bar fight, stupid choices, bad people, worse luck. My wrists still had cuffs on them, but the chain between us was broken. We stumbled into the forest, following a deer path between thick pines and rocky outcroppings. Jaden limped. Missouri didn't. "What the hell happened?" Rojo asked. "That ain't no virus. That was a demon, man." "It's something," I said, "and we're on our own now." We walked for hours. The sun climbed, but it barely pierced the canopy. Eventually, we found an old service road and followed it. We passed a mailbox split in two, then a farmhouse with a collapsed roof and no cars in sight. An abandoned ATV sat out back. Rojo went to hotwire it, but the battery was dead and the tires flat. We needed water and a place to hide. That evening, we reached a ranger station built out of stone and timber, one of those Depression-era jobs, halfway between State Park Trailhead and Hunting Lodge. It was boarded up, but Missouri used a chunk of broken pipe to pry the door open. Inside, we found canned food, a radio that only hissed static and maps, real topographical maps with county lines, logging trails, water systems. We were somewhere between Millbrook and the Taconic State Parkway, too close to Poughkeepsie for my liking, too close to people. That night, Jaden found a first aid kit and helped clean my wrists. He used to volunteer at a clinic in Queens before he got mixed up in black market crypto. Missouri kept watch, barely speaking. Rojo smoked half a pack of old menthols he found in a drawer and muttered to himself about spirits and death omens. We heard the screaming around midnight. Not near, but not far either. A kind of wail, human but broken, like someone calling for help and remembering halfway through that they weren't human anymore. We didn't sleep. The next morning, we ran into our first locals. 2 men in hunting camo came up the old trail carrying rifles. One had a scoped Remington 700. The other had a lever-action Marlin and wore a hat with a Confederate patch. They saw us in the window and their eyes went hard. "Y'all from the prison?" one of them shouted. We didn't answer. Missouri stepped outside slowly, hands raised. "We're not dangerous," he said. "We just escaped the bus crash. The guards, prisoners don't get to talk," the second man snapped, raising his rifle. Jaden screamed something behind me, and I did the only thing I could. I stepped out too, slowly, shotgun slung low. "They're dead. The guards are dead. Something's wrong out there. We're not armed." "Wrong," the man with the Marlin spat. "There's infected in the next town over. Took the grocery store. Sheriff's missing. My sister didn't come home. They didn't shoot, but they didn't invite us in either." "You come near the farm again, we'll put you down," the taller one said. And just like that, we were hunted. Not just by whatever killed Morrison, but by every scared, armed soul in the county who saw orange jumpsuits and assumed we were the problem. That was 2 days ago. Since then, we've been running, sleeping in culverts, abandoned sheds, and one time an overturned grain silo. We saw a fire take down an entire gas station in Clinton Corners. We heard gunshots echo through the hills near Wappinger. Whatever this outbreak is, it's moving fast, and no one knows who to trust. By the third day, our boots were soaked through and blistered. We followed a narrow power line cut that skirted the edge of a ridge, avoiding open roads and any place that looked remotely inhabited. Most of the properties were already empty. Driveways full of vehicles, doors ajar, children's toys left in the grass. The first real body we saw was just north of Salt Point, a middle-aged man in a UPS uniform, sprawled half inside his delivery truck with his throat missing and the back doors torn open. Rojo stripped a box cutter off his belt and checked the cargo hold for water bottles. There were none. We started rationing the last cans we'd taken from the ranger station. Mostly beans and tuna. Missouri carried the shotgun now, and I had the Remington sidearm taken from Hale. I'd cleaned it as best I could with a shirt cloth and lake water. No extra ammo, but it felt heavier in my hands than it should have, like the decision to use it came with weight I wasn't sure I wanted to carry. We reached the hamlet of Washington Hollow late that afternoon. A real blink-and-you-miss-it town, mostly barns and feed shops. A single 2-lane road cut through the center, flanked by dense woods on both sides. There was a county fairground just west of the road, gates chained shut, banners still hanging limp in the humid breeze. Rojo wanted to search the buildings. Jaden said no way. It looked like a trap. I sided with Jaden. So did Missouri. We kept moving south until we came across a shallow river, more of a creek, really, widened by recent flooding. The bridge that spanned it had collapsed in the middle. Washed-out supports and busted asphalt jutted into the current like jagged teeth. We stood there in silence, listening to the water rush through the valley below. It was the first natural sound we'd heard that didn't seem corrupted by panic or violence. "We can ford it," Missouri said finally, pointing to a spot in upstream where fallen logs had formed a natural dam. Rojo laughed bitterly. "We're soaked already, may as well swim to Albany while we're at it." Jaden squatted near the bank and dipped his hands into the flow. Fast, but shallow. Maybe 2 feet in the slow sections. No sign of bodies, at least. That was how low our standards had fallen. Any water source without corpses floating in it was considered safe. We crossed one by one. Missouri went first, testing each step with his weight, then Rojo. I went after, and Jaden brought up the rear. We kept our weapons held high, clothes clinging to our skin, and emerged muddy but alive on the other side. There was an old railroad spur running parallel to the creek, mostly overgrown but still navigable. We followed it through the woods until we reached an intersection with a gravel path that led to a barn and silo pair near a fenced pasture. The barn doors were open. We approached slowly, guns drawn. No signs of movement, no smell of rot, just dust and the faint musk of old hay. Inside, we found an ATV with a flat tire, a coil of rope, and a stack of faded feed bags. No fuel, no power, but it was shelter. That night, we slept in shifts. I took first watch. It was near midnight when I saw headlights bouncing down the gravel path. I ducked low behind the doorframe and hissed for Missouri. A pickup truck was approaching. Silver Ford F-250 with a camper shell and camo netting stretched across the hood. It stopped 20 yards out. 2 men got out, rifles raised. One had night vision goggles strapped to his forehead. The other wore a tan sheriff's vest. "Eyes on the barn," one of them whispered. Thermal picked up movement inside, probably deer, but stay sharp. Jaden almost sneezed from the hay dust. I slapped a hand over his mouth. Rojo crept up from behind with the box cutter clenched white-knuckled in his fist. Missouri had the shotgun trained on the door. Then one of the men stepped inside. He was younger than I expected, probably early 30s, military posture, smooth hands. He swept his rifle across the stalls and paused right in front of me. I raised my hands, slow and deliberate. "Don't shoot, we're not infected." His rifle didn't move. "Prison jumpsuit, that right?" "Yeah," I said. "Transport bus went down 3 days ago. The guards are dead." Behind him, the second man barked, "Jacob, you good?" Jacob didn't lower the rifle. "3 survivors in here, maybe more, armed." Missouri spoke from the hayloft ladder. "We're not a threat. Just trying to stay alive." Jacob hesitated, then reached for his radio. He never finished the call. Gunfire erupted outside, short bursts, automatic fire. The second man screamed. Something large slammed into the side of the truck, metal crumpling like foil. Rojo ran for the back of the barn. Jaden shouted something about movement in the trees. We didn't wait. We fled into the dark, through the pasture under the barbed wire and back toward the creek. Behind us, I heard something dragging itself across gravel and the crack of a rifle being fired over and over until it went silent. We regrouped an hour later at an abandoned farmhouse. The kitchen had no windows and smelled like mildew and rat droppings. Jaden had a gash down his leg. Rojo had lost his only weapon. Missouri hadn't fired the shotgun once. "What did you see?" I asked him when the others were asleep. He shook his head slowly. "Not a person. Not anymore. Fast. Arms too long. Eyes glowing like glass reflectors. I don't think it felt pain." Neither of us slept that night. The next day, we reached a town called Pleasant Valley. Name didn't match what we found. Cars stacked on top of each other near the roundabout. A fire truck half submerged in a retention pond. Hand-painted signs read, "No entry infected zone," and "We will shoot." We stayed low, ducking between hedgerows and backyard fences. We needed supplies, shoes for Jaden, ammo, real food. The police station was out of the question, but the Ace Hardware on Route 44 looked untouched. The front window was smashed, but the inside was mostly intact. We scavenged headlamps, work gloves, propane canisters, and a crowbar. I found a locked cabinet with .22 ammo and a box of flares. We took what we could carry and left before dusk. Rojo found a small house nearby that was still intact. No lights, no bodies, just a porch swing and an American flag faded from the sun. Inside, we found bottled water, a generator that had run dry, and most surprisingly, a family photo on the mantel, untouched by the chaos. A man, a woman, 2 kids, all smiling in front of a campfire. I felt something then. Grief, maybe, or guilt. We were inside their home, taking their things, sleeping in their rooms. But we didn't have a choice. That night, Missouri and I stood watch again. He kept staring at the tree line. I asked him what he was thinking. "They're not spreading this like a normal virus," he said finally. "This isn't just airborne or bloodborne. It's faster, cleaner, like it's selecting who to take." "You think someone designed it?" "I think somebody opened the wrong door, and now the whole world's being invited in." In the distance, we heard sirens start and then cut off mid-tone, the kind of sound you only hear when cities die. 2 mornings later, everything fell apart. We were cutting across a dry creek bed when we stumbled on a convoy of National Guard trucks. 4 Humvees, an armored personnel carrier, and a fuel rig, all parked in a staggered formation near a high school soccer field. Tents flapped in the breeze. Nobody moved. We approached cautiously, Missouri up front. Then we saw the blood trails, dozens of them. Drag marks, scratch patterns on the pavement, a pile of spent shell casings near one of the trucks. It wasn't just blood either. There were shredded pieces of uniforms, boots melted from fire or acid, God knows what, and something that looked like a whole chunk of scalp stuck to the grill of one Humvee. The place reeked of metal, fuel, and rot. It was clear whatever happened here wasn't a skirmish. It was an execution. Quick, brutal, one-sided. We moved cautiously now, each step deliberate. Rojo crouched near the command tent and picked up a broken field radio. He tapped the side and lifted the mic. Nothing. Static. Jaden checked the vehicles. 2 had been stripped clean, probably by survivors. 1 still had the keys dangling in the ignition, but the battery was dead. The APC, however, was sealed. Rear doors locked. Black scorch marks around the exterior told a story we didn't want to know. Missouri climbed the hood and peeked through the narrow armored viewport. After a moment, he stepped back, face pale. Insides full. All soldiers, helmets on, weapons in laps, no movement. Dead? I asked. He nodded. If we're lucky. I felt the air change then, just slightly, like the wind had shifted direction, or the treetops had gone too still. You learn to notice those things when you've been hunted long enough. Missouri must have felt it too because he was already scanning the perimeter, hand resting lightly on the shotgun stock. Jaden turned to speak, but I cut him off with a raised hand. The tree line at the far edge of the field moved. Not swayed, not rustled, moved. I saw a shape emerge, no, more like a ripple of several shapes in a line, low to the ground. Crouched, fast, too fast. Go, I whispered. Backtrack through the ditch now. We ran, not in a full sprint but a hunter's retreat. Controlled, quiet, avoiding branches and rocks, using the low sunlight behind us to keep our shadows long and away from view. Missouri watched our 6. Jaden led the way toward a utility substation we'd seen earlier, half-fenced, with a collapsed transformer and scattered tools. Not much of a stronghold, but better than open field. We made it halfway before Rojo stumbled. It was subtle. 1 foot caught on a vine, knees buckling into the dirt, but the sound he made drew them. The thing in the lead let out this guttural clicking like it was speaking to the others, or warning us. I turned in time to see it lurch forward. Its arms were elongated, fingertips darkened like they'd been burned. No shirt, just a torn vest and something metallic embedded in its ribs. Dog tags maybe, or shrapnel. Its mouth wasn't even open in a snarl, just slack. Dripping. Eyes glowing faint green. Not reflective, but lit from within. It didn't run. It charged. Missouri fired. 1 blast from the shotgun and the thing went tumbling sideways. But it got up again, right away, staggering like a drunk, limbs jerking out of sync, and still came for us. Rojo was on his feet now. Jaden pulled him back and yelled, "Inside, move!" We piled through the chain-link gate into the substation and braced the entry with a steel ladder wedged between cinder blocks. It wasn't secure, not really, but it gave us time to catch our breath. 5 minutes of silence. 10. No movement. We thought we'd lost them. Then the chain link flexed, not ripped, not snapped. Flexed like something was pushing against it and deciding whether or not it was worth the effort. That was when I saw the flare gun on the bench. Still loaded. Red casing. Aimed to signal for help, but now it would serve a different purpose. I fired it directly into the brush. The flare screamed into the foliage and lit the forest in a hot red glow for 3 seconds, and in that time, we saw all of them. At least 12, maybe 15. Crawling, upright, hunched in trees like apes or perched on old fence posts. Some in partial uniforms, others naked or wrapped in shredded blankets like cloaks. One had a full police duty belt still strapped around its waist, radio and all. They didn't flee from the light. They watched. Then, slowly, they receded into the woods like a wave pulling back into the ocean. Not panicked, not afraid, like they'd learned something, like they'd tested us. We didn't sleep that night. Next morning, we made a plan. Staying on foot was suicide. We needed wheels, food, fuel, and above all, distance. Jaden remembered passing a volunteer firehouse a few miles east near Lagrangeville. Said it looked intact, might have working radios, maybe even a truck. It was a long walk, almost 7 hours through brush and overgrown trails. We passed 2 crashed sedans nose to nose on a narrow bridge. Dried blood painted the doors. Rojo wouldn't stop staring at the back seat of one where a car seat sat overturned. A small stuffed bear crushed beneath it. "Don't look," I told him. "We're already ghosts," he muttered. When we reached the firehouse, it was dusk again. A squat, concrete structure with 2 garage bays, a rusted tower, and a row of flagpoles stripped bare, no sound, no movement. The front door was unlocked. Inside, we found chaos. There was one body in the radio room. Female, uniformed. Head blown out from under the chin, revolver in hand. We said nothing. Jaden pulled her badge out. Carolyn Voss, DCVFD, and closed her eyes gently. Rojo covered the body with a turnout coat. The truck was there. A red brush unit, older model Ford Super Duty with a full tank and keys in the ignition. Missouri and I checked under the hood, clean. He smiled for the first time in days. We'll get at least 50 miles before we need to siphon again. We packed what we could, mounted 2 crowbars and a Halligan tool to the front rack. Jaden found a flare stack, still dry. Rojo raided the vending machine. It wasn't much, but it was hope. That night, we drove for the first time since the crash. Down winding roads past overgrown mailboxes, under blinking traffic lights stuck on yellow. Past a dairy plant with its gates twisted open and its silos empty. We saw a cargo helicopter, UH-60, military, smoldering in a clearing with rotors embedded in pine trunks, nobody inside, no signs of where it had come from. Jaden took notes as we drove. He said if we were going to die, somebody should know where we'd been, what we saw. He started calling our group Echo 6, like we were a real squad. Even wrote it on the side of the fire truck in grease pencil. None of us had the heart to tell him it sounded ridiculous. Because maybe, just maybe, it wasn't. Near midnight, we reached a ridgeline that overlooked a small reservoir. Sprout Creek, according to the road sign. The water shimmered faintly under the half moon. A stone pump house stood at the edge, half collapsed, and beyond it we could see a town. Beacon, or what was left of it. Faint flickers of fire. A horn in the distance. The glow of flares arranged in a triangle along Main Street. It looked like a signal. Not military, not random. Organized. 3 flares forming a triangle meant something. Either a warning or a welcome. From up on the ridge we saw a barricade set up near the town's east entrance. A few sandbags. A school bus turned sideways across the road. A pickup truck with a spotlight mounted on the roof scanned the darkness in slow arcs. There were people there, armed, but not uniformed. Survivors. We parked the fire truck in the tree line a mile out, camouflaged it with a tarp we found in the truck bay, and moved in on foot through backyards and alleys. Even now, weeks into the outbreak, I still found it strange how silent everything had become. No crickets, no distant hum of HVAC systems, no televisions echoing through windows, just wind and ash and that ever-present sense of being watched. We reached the edge of Beacon close to 1 a.m. The houses were dark, but not burned. Windows were boarded with plywood, and chalk marks had been drawn on some of the doors. Triangles, slashes, circles, some sort of code. Jaden whispered that his old apartment in Yonkers had been marked the same way after the hurricane last year. A search and clear system used by emergency teams. Then we heard the whistle. Sharp, 2 notes, followed by silence. A figure stepped out from a front porch across the street, silhouetted in the moonlight. He was holding a bolt-action rifle with the kind of casual authority that said he knew how to use it. Not military, civilian, early 50s, hard build, canvas jacket, and worn boots. He didn't raise the weapon, but he didn't lower it either. "You from Hopewell?" he asked, voice low but steady. We didn't answer at first. Rojo gave a subtle nod to me, letting me speak. "No," I said. "We were on the road, prison transport, guards turned, we got clear." The man frowned but didn't move. "Names?" "Tom Russo," I said. "These are Missouri, Rojo, and Jaden." "Felons?" "Yes." "Contagion exposure?" "Negative, no symptoms. We've avoided contact since the TAC HQ massacre north of LaGrangeville. We've been living off scavenged supplies, filtered water, and staying off-grid." The man exhaled through his nose and slowly shouldered the rifle. "You sound like a man who's done this before." "I've done time. I know how to stay alive." He waved us forward. "Come on, you'll talk to Halloran. If you're lying, you'll wish you weren't." Beacon hadn't fallen. It had adapted on Main Street. The triangle of flares marked the edge of the safe zone. Behind it, they erected a makeshift fort using cars, dumpsters, old construction barriers, and shipping containers dragged in from the river depot. Inside were about 30 people, civilians, off-duty cops, veterans, even a few teenagers with skateboards and hunting knives. Everyone carried something: machetes, baseball bats, deer rifles, rebar spears. No one looked soft. We were taken to a 3-story red brick building, Beacon High School, now converted into their operations hub. In the cafeteria-turned-command center, a map of Dutchess County was taped across the wall with pushpins and scribbled notes: scouting paths, refugee camps, quarantine rings, supply lines. A few zones were circled in red with one word: lost. Halloran turned out to be a woman. Mid-40, has buzzed blonde hair, former EMT. She had a Glock 19 on her belt and a scar across her left collarbone that peeked out from her flannel shirt. Her tone was blunt but fair. "We don't turn people away," she said, "but we don't take risks either. We'll put you through our med protocol. 72-hour quarantine, minimal contact. You pull weight, you earn food. If you pass, you stay. If not, you walk." We agreed. What choice did we have? The quarantine cell was a converted locker room, floor bleached raw, cots separated by curtains. A single guard watched us from a folding chair in the hallway through a plexiglass divider. Meals came in through a slot in the door. No contact. Medical checks twice a day. They tested our eyes, blood pressure, reflexes, breath odor, even our balance. They weren't just looking for fevers, they were watching for early neurosigns. Tremors, speech slurs, light sensitivity. Jaden asked if this was protocol from the CDC. "No," Halloran said. "This is all local. CDC's gone dark. They called in everything to Camp Smith and then nothing. No contact since." On the second night, we heard gunfire outside the quarantine zone. Short bursts, then silence. Next morning, 2 people were missing from the camp roster. No one spoke about it. By the 4th day, we were cleared. They gave us assignments. Jaden on logistics with supply runners, Rojo on perimeter watch, Missouri and I with the recon team. Every day we went out in groups of 4, 2 from Beacon, 2 from outside. We scouted nearby towns, looked for vehicles, siphoned fuel, searched for survivors. The infection had already gutted Poughkeepsie and moved down the Hudson line. Beacon was one of the few places holding, but it wasn't going to last. One of the recon boys, Davis, found a military drone. It had crashed just outside a quarry near Fishkill. The body was intact, camera, comms array, all of it. It had thermal imaging. They rigged a portable screen from a salvaged laptop. What we saw on the footage changed everything. There were no more isolated groups of infected. No stragglers. No scattered attacks. They were organizing, clustering in circular formations around bodies of water and power infrastructure, moving through valleys in coordinated patterns, blocking bridges and setting off vehicle alarms to attract attention. No central leader, no radio signals, but a hive instinct. Rojo called it urban wolfpack behavior. Missouri just muttered, "They're getting smarter." That night, the council at Beacon held an emergency meeting. I wasn't invited, but I stood outside the gym where they met and listened. There were arguments. One woman wanted to abandon town and move upriver. Halloran pushed for a defensive plan, fallback zones, fuel caches, an escape corridor along Route 9. Others talked about pushing south to Newburgh, but everyone knew we couldn't hold forever. 3 days later, the first breach happened. A family of 4 showed up at the gate. 2 kids, a woman, and an older man. The girl was maybe 10, the boy 6. They looked fine, clean, no wounds. But 6 hours later, both children seized during a meal, convulsions, pupils blown wide, then they started screaming. Not Wordstone's high-pitched warbles like echolocation. By the time the guards tried to contain them, it was too late. The boy lunged, bit through a man's cheek. The girl jumped 2 tables and locked her hands around someone's throat. No infected moves like that, not animal skillers. We lost 9 people that night. One of them was Jaden. He died trying to protect the supply crates, swinging a crowbar until his arm broke. I buried what was left of him behind the auto shop. Rojo never spoke again. He just sat on the roof each night watching the tree line, shotgun across his lap, unmoving. Missouri changed too, sharper, more tactical, like prison instincts kicked back in. Me? I waited, because I'd seen the signs. The infected weren't just evolving. They were tracking our fuel runs, anticipating our patrol routes, avoiding our flares. One night, I stood on the water tower and looked out toward the old highway. Dozens of small fires burned in a perfect arc. Not random. A perimeter. That's when I knew Beacon was surrounded. The night we left, it was chaos. Rojo, Missouri, and I broke into the school's armory and took what we needed. 2 radios, 6 loaded mags, a trauma kit, and Halloran's map. Not out of betrayal, out of truth. The town wouldn't survive another week. We tried to warn her, but she was too loyal to the people to abandon it. As we crossed the Sprout Creek Bridge one last time, Missouri lit a road flare and dropped it behind us. A red trail of fire bloomed across the pavement, and in the trees beyond I saw them. Dozens, maybe 100, standing still, watching, waiting. And they didn't move, not until we disappeared into the woods. It's been 12 days since we left Beacon. We've headed north, avoiding towns, sleeping in caves and barns. But everywhere we go, the infected follow, just behind, just out of sight. They're not chasing us. They're escorting us. There's something bigger out there, something we haven't seen yet. I don't know what it wants, but I think it's learning. And I think it knows my name. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.